Welcome to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fauscette. Each week, we interview experts in artificial intelligence, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. Welcome. Our show today is the May edition of AI Pulse. Again, you probably noticed my co-host Tom Pringle, Director of Pilot Research, sitting there.
Hello there.
Coming to us in the afternoon from the Grand UK, our new trading partner in the US. So we're excited about
that. Feeling a special relationship. And it's a sunny Friday. Everything is good, Michael. Everything is good.
It is. You're right. I completely agree. All right. Well, we're going to catch up on the. I don't know. We're going to catch up on the latest AI news, of course, which is what we do in this show. So, I don't know. Let's. Why don't we jump into it? And I got a question for you on the first one. How comfortable are you putting your credit card in a agentic AI chatbot to go make purchases for you?
Currently, not at all. That was easy. Next question, please.
Well, I sort of suspected that's where we were going to go. No,
this is the visa. This is the intelligence.
This is the visa thing. Yeah. Announced last week, maybe, or I forget. But it was interesting, and MasterCard, I think, is working on something like this too. But intelligent commerce platform. The idea with Visa was they put guardrails around this to make agentic AI appear. Make agents appear controlled and comfortable and build trust around the idea that I'm going to give it my credit card and have it go off and do things for me, which I mean, it's a reasonable concept and something we've talked about for a while, like, oh, go buy these airline tickets for me. But I'm not sure I ever in my brain closed the loop of, and here's my credit card, which of course it would have to have. Yeah.
Anyway. Oh, no, indeed, and obviously guardrails in all these different applications, especially when it comes to just everything. Actually, I was going to say especially when it comes to money, but I can think of lots of other things why I'd say they're even more important. And maybe we'll come to that. Your example: go find me a flight to destination X. Don't spend more than $600. Can I see it happening? Sure, of course I can. Of course I can see it happening, right? Can I see it going wrong? Yeah, I can see that happening too. I mean, you can go from the kind of the simple stuff like it's going to end up being the assistant's going to need to know you well, right? So I know for a fact that you fly American Airlines as an airline of preference. So what happens when you tell it $600 and it finds you a flight on Delta? You're like, no points, no miles. Disaster.
No, it would have. I would have all that stuff built into either the prompt, or they better have a setting in there that takes it because I only want to fly, and I want an aisle seat, and I want it. I'm picky about the seating. I'm picky about the airline.
But then equally, to that point at which you're buying something online, websites, and this might be a shocking newsflash, don't always 100% work perfectly every time. And we've all been in that situation where something's got double clicked by accident or triple clicked or whatever, and we found out we bought the same thing or too many of something or whatever it was. And I always kind of run back to my statement with regard to automation, which is unless those guardrails are really good and it compensates for issues like that may be beyond the agent's control, you're just going to potentially run the risk of doing lots of things wrong really, really fast. I mean, I can only click buy 3 or 4 times in frustration in quick succession, whereas I suspect an agent's click rate is faster than my own. I'm just saying.
No, I mean, it is it's a scenario that I could envision. I think as I was looking through what they announced, and obviously I haven't tried it yet and don't, know exactly how it functions, but the idea is that you build, the guardrails very carefully around it. Like, here are my maximum spend limits for these types of things and my preferences and all that. I don't know. I mean, I've adopted and I'm using agents for a lot of stuff. And it's been really interesting, but I do have to say, I don't have an agent that has my credit card. So I'm not closed to the idea. Well, I mean, yet is the right word, because I assume eventually that would make sense, right? I thought that all along. Like, if you're going to replace your admin, you're going to, I mean, I don't know about you, but my admins always had my credit card numbers because they took care of things like buying flights and things like that. So I don't.
Yeah, and even if it's just personal life life admin that you're doing yourself, um,
Yeah.
just it is what it is. You're going to find that for I think people will choose, as so often has been proven, people will choose convenience ultimately. And that convenience of not having to set up an account on yet another website with another password, even if you've got a password manager, and then you forget to do something, or the doorbell goes and you abandon your shopping cart, and the list goes on. We've all been there.
I mean, we've all we've all been there. And even like, I bought that and then I'm waiting for it to come in and then I'm like, well, where did that order go? And I go back and I didn't buy it. I did something wrong somewhere or kicked out or, crashed or whatever. I mean, it's possible. It's funny you mentioned the password manager because I literally right before we jumped on to record this, I was reading an article that talked about how that's the new attack vector is extensions to browsers that let them spoof your password manager and get in and take your credentials. That's the new
Ouch.
attack vector. And they
That
were
sounds
saying
really
that
horrifying.
well, no, it's not good. And I mean the example was talking about Chrome, but apparently that's not. I mean, it's not. It's any browser that has extensions, which as far as I know, is all browsers I've used lately. So I
All the
assume
modern
that's
ones, yeah, I think.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I don't know. It was interesting though because that is that's always been a little bit of it's a fear, but it's a vault, and so you think vaults are made to not be broken into, and I should be good. But the truth is, if you just Google password manager and hacks, you'll see a very long list.
please don't
So
do that. Please don't do that.
now it is actually kind of depressing. So it's better if you don't do it. But
Yeah. So indeed, and look, I will never, ever, 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 ever claim to be a cybersecurity expert.
mm,
But I mean, it just feels like there is a new way of being, you know, conned, information skimmed, whatever it
yeah,
is, every 5 minutes. And look, we know it's speeding up. We know it's getting more sophisticated. And I always say to people, I suppose I worry about the ones that I hear about for sure. Sometimes, if I'm getting particularly anxious, I start to worry about the ones that I haven't heard about because
no,
they're
no,
the ones
those are the ones
that
that really scare me the most. To be
yeah,
honest, yeah, no,
it's like
you're absolutely right.
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
oh shoot, what could they? Oh my goodness! Right, I'm going to go and live in a log cabin in the middle of a forest, off grid
I,
completely.
I mean, it ends up being an argument for passkeys that's kind of an interesting one, and I played around with them some, and I use them on some sites, but I admit they are very annoying because you're always going like, "What did I do with that passkey?" Like, I know it's here somewhere. Where did I put it?
Agreed, indeed. Yeah, I don't
Anyway,
know.
no,
I find the software on those a little finicky too sometimes.
well, no, I mean, there's unfortunately, as soon as you read that security companies are using AI to beef up your security, you're in trouble because if we're doing that to defend ourselves, guess what? you know, like this, it's always a reaction to something. And so, of course, the
Indeed.
tools are being used on the other side and were being used on the other side before we started to try to figure out how to fight it. So,
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And before we completely derail from the original, oh dear, my phone must be on beepy thing. Sorry, folks. Sorry, Michael. There's a very
that'll work.
off beepy thing. Um, that was actually one of the points I was going to make. If there's any background noise, I know that I have become famous for being the guy with the background noise every time we do one of these. Whether it's on printing something or my dog going crazy, or on this occasion, we have some lovely guys and some contractors doing some work on my mom's bathroom, which is great. Unfortunately, my mom's bathroom is kind of fairly above my office.
All right. Well, if we see dust falling on your head, we will.
The
we'll
dust,
know what's going
I'd be okay with the dust. What I'd be concerned about would be water.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that, but
Okay,
that,
that's
I
fair.
mean, maybe if I get podcast first, I get into
Well,
that famous for being the guy that got, you know,
it might be. I mean, it should certainly go viral. We'd have to pull the clip out for sure. Anyway,
but
okay, back
but
to the
to
topic.
return briefly, let's return very briefly to that whole visa thing. I think it's interesting. So I was thinking about it at the moment, a lot of talk about, kind of who controls access to all this information now with regards to kind of the web search engine paradigm versus AI and assistants. And then, of course, kind of agents and those agents, and then this kind of visa announcement. It kind of feels like, and look, I'd love to hear what you think of this weird way of thinking about it. It kind of feels like there's several big players on the going on the court at the moment. I know sports, obviously. I'm a big sports fan. So please use this as an analogy is absolutely hilarious. But it feels like there's some really significant players on the field, court, whatever, that thing where people do sports. And the ball, which is the internet, and everyone who uses the internet is up in the air, and several people trying to grab for it at the moment. And I kind of how it feels right now.
I think it is. The thing is, I mean, we know agentic AI, and we'll talk about this a few more times through the other list of things we have here. But agentic AI is getting a lot of attention, but it is actually also getting a lot of use. Like businesses are implementing now. A lot of them are still proof of concept and pilots at this stage. But how long have we been talking about agentic AI? Really, 8 months, 9 months, maybe. Obviously people were working on it before that, but as far as it being a topic and being real enough to actually go do, it's a recent thing, I guess is a way to say that. So
yeah, I think so. That's one way of thinking about it. I think the you can make a case, and I have in the past. Sorry, you won't like this. Well, I don't think you like this. Let's find out. I kind of always felt it was a little bit of a spectrum in terms of, kind of we've had, simple rules-based chatbots and things like that. And then moving on. Can you hear that saw in the background?
I just heard a little jiggle.
That's good. That's good. Because trust me, it's quite loud.
Okay, anyway, well, it's not that loud on here.
That's good. That's good. Apologies. I think about kind of the evolution of that kind of chatbot functionality, and we talked a bit about on a couple of episodes ago about automation in terms of RPA, not RPA, RPA, so robotic process automation, and I think there's an argument that has that it's just one of those things in tech where there's almost like this moment where everyone decides, okay, we're going to call this agentic AI. And we're betting on it, and it is now a big topic. And 9 months is about right.
Well, I mean, I think you're right that it is it's an evolutionary. It's almost like there's this slider scale of what capabilities are there, but also what you need to apply, right? So you got on one end, you've got logic rule based things that we've had for years, and on the very top end, you've got this autonomous agent that's completely autonomous and self learning and all those things, right? So, but there are a lot of things in the middle, and a lot of those things in the middle hit a lot of use cases that companies are going to use. So I don't know that I've had this argument a few times, actually. It's not a binary thing, right? It's not, it is A or it is not A. It is some sort of A, and you figure out where it falls on that.
Yeah.
To me, anyway.
Indeed, I completely agree. I think it's interesting because that definition is somewhat powered by two factors. One you mentioned already, which is kind of the guardrails you put in place, right?
Yeah.
So the fewer the guardrails, the more trusted, the autonomous, but also simply the capability of the technology in question, right? So we've talked about the difference between small local models versus mega models at the center. So I think there's a number of different variables that are powering that kind of that point you're making.
Well, and there's a bunch of, the technology's evolving very quickly too. There's a lot of new theories about, how to reduce hallucinations that are being tested, and, how do you run the retrievers and, all those things, right? Yeah. Well, yeah.
It's almost like you knew where you were going next in this conversation.
Yeah. Well, it is the appropriate topic, I think, but for where we go next. And that's this whole idea that, according to several reports I've read, and one was a New York Times article this week, the AI is starting to it's getting much more powerful. Yes, no question about that. When we're talking about the publicly available, generative AI type, like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, and apparently, once they've added these reasoning capabilities, which everybody, I mean, all the models are adding, of course, because the idea that it can walk step by step through what it's doing to one reason more effectively, but also to show you what it's doing.
Yeah.
That's a powerful idea, and I like it a lot. But then apparently it is having some. You're starting to see many more hallucinations the more this reasoning system has been implemented. So, and they don't seem to know why. But then I know you saw this other article I dropped in here that there's a French testing firm that
Yeah.
has a theory that they tested that I thought was really interesting, and frankly, it's the the polished side of this coin, I guess, is that apparently apparently when they tested, they found that short answers can increase your risk of hallucination. So, in other words, short prompts, short answers, quick kind of interactions have a greater tendency to be inaccurate. And the one thing that I particularly like in this was they released the test of all the major models that are out there, the open source ones and the private or the publicly available ones. And out of those, there was a significant difference in the long answer, short answer question. So in other words, the shorter responses tended to hallucinate at a much higher rate, but there was also a massive difference in the models and which ones
Mm.
did or didn't fall to this. And I without putting the whole list up and talking through something that's probably not that exciting when you put it up. But anyway, Claude 3.7 Sonnet was by far the most accurate, least hallucinating model, I should say. That's the right way
Yeah.
to say it.
It's really interesting, and as you, I would love to know what's driving it. And I think that kind of short prompt versus long prompt is a really interesting way of looking at it. And look, my instinct would be that the more complex the thing you ask for, the more reasoning steps it's taking, and therefore there's the more opportunities for things that are patently wrong, i.e., hallucinations, or e.g. Well, it's i.e. or e.g. Well, let's just say hallucinations, whatever. There's more opportunities for it to get caught in that reasoning process, right? So if I make up something completely random, and then there's only one gate to check on that, that's, okay, well, but I also
No, I
think
mean, that's
go on.
no, I was just going to say that's fair, and the thing is, your mind, when you think of it, you think the more complex thing would be much more likely to hallucinate. But I think what you're saying is really interesting. The more we go to reasoning models, and you can actually see the reasoning, it's
Yeah,
much easier for you to catch the step that takes it off the rails. That's fair. Yeah.
yeah, that's really interesting. That's how I think about it at this point. I also
Mm.
think it's slightly problematic, and look, let's not venture too far into how human brains works. I certainly don't know how mine does, if it does indeed at all. Which is, there's always, I feel like there's a human desire to have short, concise, answer all the question
Mm.
answers to what are often
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
complex questions. I think that's something that we've done forever. Really, this is not an
Yeah.
AI
No,
thing.
that's fair.
Because the
Yeah,
AI
it's
is
not just an AI.
problem a little bit, which is, kind of, if I ask it to summarize the causes of the Great Depression between the two world wars in one sentence, I strongly suspect, although it will have no doubt a valiant attempt at it, I'm not saying it's going to hallucinate. I'm simply saying we'll
Maybe.
probably miss out on some of the nuance of all the different factors at play.
Yeah. I mean, again, that's fair, and I think we're evolving and learning as we use these tools more, and as the tools get used more, and as they continue to improve them. So to me, it doesn't. It's not a surprise that there are certain features, certain things that will be rolled out that have to be rolled back or contained a bit more or whatever, just because they find out that in the wild it does things that they didn't anticipate. Which, I mean, let's be honest, software's had things like that happen for years. So
Yep. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm back to my one. I think there's this wonderful expression of people believing that, because it's software, it's definitely going to be right.
Mm.
That seems to be an impression amongst some sort of some business stakeholders. The computer says it; it must be true. I think all of us with pattern familiarity know that sometimes mistakes get made when software is written, and things don't always kind of work the way that we expected them to. Or that thing that we're reliant on, for example, some random API to pull some information from some other system, breaks one day, completely destroying the entire digital process. So, it is the nature of technology and software. The worrisome thing for me, as you have already expressed, and as I boringly continuously express, highlight, underscore, get on my soapbox about it, etc., is that, kind of in the rush to sort of start to see some return on some of these big AI investments, I worry a little bit, a lot, sometimes in between those 2 points, about, so it goes wrong, maybe we have to roll back. But what if it goes wrong in a way which really impacts someone in a way which is not rollbackable, right? So it ruins
Well, I
someone's.
mean, that's the what's the movie, the War Games? You remember that movie?
Yeah.
That's the scenario, right? It's like you if you don't know what you're doing and you tell it to do a thing that you don't understand, then the outcomes may or may not be what you desired. So that's fair.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. And that is one of those things, right? What else can one say?
Yeah. Well, I was going to tell you another thing. I was thinking about this when I read this article, and you'll understand this in a sec. But years ago when I was at IDC, I was at Xerox PARC and having some conversations about some of the things they were working on. One of the things that I found really interesting, and I wrote a good bit about it back then, although I don't remember a lot of the details at this point, to be honest. But it was about this idea that Xerox PARC had built this software that allowed you to change the way the web worked, so it wasn't a point to point issue, and it wasn't in its current form. It was more of a decentralized network, right? So it
Yeah.
pushed out into all the devices around you access and passing things back and forth. So your phone becomes a server on the web, and et cetera, right? So it was interesting. And I mean, obviously it never took off because we're still using the web the same way we've used it for, how many ever years now. So,
Well,
but it was an interesting idea.
yeah, and if memory serves, and sometimes it doesn't, you and I talked about this over dinner some years ago.
Oh, I
You were
think
telling
you're right. I think you're right.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
were telling me it was a very nice restaurant you recommended. I think you had 2 others, and you told me it was delicious. Um, and you're saying it's really there's a decentralized internet, and I think it's interesting because, of course, I suspect you're going to get into the concept of decentralized AI from this particular jumping off
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, that
Um,
was kinda my direction, I guess, is a good way to say that.
indeed, and although if we're decentralized, maybe it's in multiple directions, not just one. Um,
Well, apparently, I suppose you're right, it would have to be, right?
no, but it's interesting. I mean, there's lots of different things you can say about this, but I think kind of, I suppose, on a practical level, I mean, it makes sense, and we can talk a bit more about the concept itself. But also, I think the flip side of that is, or the ugly side of that, or I don't know, whatever, the less polished side, to borrow from you earlier, is that single points of failure tend to have
Mm,
fairly traumatic impacts on sort of lots of different things. So, kind of when a vendor goes down, a big vendor that a lot of people rely on, even if it's just, whoops, that wasn't meant to happen, I pushed the wrong button, or
right.
in my case, I'd probably trip over the cable or something and unplug it from the wall. Um, I'm kind of clumsy. Then it has a really significant real world impact, not just in dollar, euro, pound terms, but in, I am trying to go home for the vacation to see my parents or whatever.
Mm, right.
I think decentralization is a big part of that. Kind of some of the
Yeah.
answers to that.
It is. I mean, the thing that I think is interesting in this idea, because it is still conceptually, possible, but I don't know that anybody's tried doing this actually. Is the idea that if you could decentralize, you could get past the current. Um, barriers to adoption that small businesses have, because the cost is extremely high when you go beyond the $20 subscription a month per person, which is the very
Yeah.
basic way to use the tools. So I mean, if you could, we're seeing, and I saw this in survey data last year too, the fastest adoption of generative AI has been in small to medium business, because it also offered the greatest opportunity for them to equalize against their larger competitors. Makes
Hmm.
sense to me.
Yep.
So if you get to a certain point, though, as it starts to scale out, it is getting more and more and more expensive, not less and less, which is, it's just the nature of where we are in the curve of the technology. It will get cheaper, but at this point it's not. And so it's a barrier for small business if they're thinking about this. So if you could run it decentralized, it's an interesting idea. I mean, it would certainly create a situation where you could build it and maintain it much more cheaply than you can today.
Yeah. Uh, and again, just yes. I think it touched on a bunch of topics we've made conversation about in the past. So things like, for example, kind of more domain or task specific models,
Yeah. Yeah.
which might not, kind of be the thing for a big provider. Or what was the thing I was going to say about this? It wasn't now. Gosh darn it! Well, kind of basically the sharing of resources, right? So
Right.
and there's some parallel here, isn't there? In terms of,
Yeah.
I know it's not a good parallel, but if you see what I mean. But with cloud computing, right? So I can borrow,
Mm.
rent a little high-end resource for a few minutes to run a big complicated model, if I wish
Yeah.
to, and I pay a price for that. Um,
Right.
uh, could I do that uh, with AI? Probably not. And could I do that with decentralized AI? Maybe.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a fair point. You're going to consume the resource that's supposed to get cheaper. The only way to really ensure that today is perhaps, well, two approaches, right? One, this decentralized version, which I think is interesting, and the other one is something that we've talked about before too, and that's that there are a lot of things you can do with specialty approaches, whether it's an agent or whether it's an ML system or whatever. But if it's using a language model and you can go to a domain specific small language model and run it locally, you've
Yeah.
cut your costs dramatically,
Yeah.
which is interesting.
Yeah. And may also do a better, more specific job for the one that you're looking,
Yeah,
task that you're
yeah,
looking for.
yeah. Yeah, and,
Yeah.
and
100%.
frankly, I think that's where we're going. I think that is the trend right now, because you're starting to see it more and more. There are very, very specialized agents that start to be able to work as a network of agents, or a collaborative of agents, or whatever we want to call it, a co-op of agents. I don't know. And that, I think, that's an interesting approach. But
Yeah.
anyway,
You just made me think of the old term crowdsourcing.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's essentially, yeah.
Crowdsourcing.
Anyway, well, so, and talking about resources, I want to make sure we get into this one, because I thought this was pretty interesting. So apparently, OpenAI has ditched their for-profit move because of so much resistance, and I guess everything from state governments to Elon Musk had put file briefs, amicus briefs, and all sorts of things against them to keep them from trying to make this shift. And so they came out this week and announced that they've come up with a different way to approach this.
Yes, this is a public benefit corporation, if memory
Yeah.
serves. Now,
Well, it leaves the board in place too, right? That's the other thing.
yeah,
It leaves the nonprofit board in place, and it still is the controlling board for the public benefit corporation, which is able to generate revenue.
at this point, I'm going to say my usual disclaimer when it comes to things like corporate law. I am not a lawyer. Uh,
No, no, but
but,
but it but that but it is,
but
I
it's
mean, from a
interesting, isn't
US
it? 'Cause
tax law perspective, it is in a US operation sort of a thing. It is, I mean, it is a alternative, because I guess the one thing that I was a little surprised about, but now after I read it and I started to look at it a little bit more, I guess it makes sense. But that the SoftBank $30 billion investment had a condition that they do the for-profit transition, but apparently they have managed to keep that investment on the table because of this public benefit corporation approach, which is not exactly, going completely for profit, and it's not exactly staying completely nonprofit. So it's a middle ground.
Indeed, and if memory serves, and correct me if you know, and folks write in, as it were, if I'm wrong. Isn't Claude's parent Anthropic a public benefit corporation as well?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure.
I've got a
Yeah.
sneaking suspicion it is.
Mm.
I could check live.
Yeah, it
You may
wouldn't surprise me, but I don't remember off the top of my head exactly the structure, but it wouldn't surprise
look, I've
me.
got a big screen here. I think so. I think I might be right on this one. But anyway, if you got it wrong, I apologize in advance. I am very sorry. But we'll deal with it later. Or indeed, ask an agent or some sort of large language model.
There you go. Perplexity, or
Yeah,
you could use the new Anthropic Claude web search API that would help me a way to find it.
I could. It was quite frustrating. So I was on 3.7, so that's the latest version of Sonnet, I believe. And I said, so can you access the internet? And he said, yes, I can. I'm like, ooh.
Yes, you can. That only happened, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago, maybe not even that long. Because that was always my issue. I like Claude a lot, and I have liked it ever since I first tried it. But without a web connection, it was not useful to me because most of what I do is research. So if you can't run the query out to the to the web, then you're not going to find the information you're looking for. So
indeed, that.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because we talked about this quite a lot. You know that I'm I would regard as being healthily skeptical user of AI. Others would call me I don't know, a luddite, and whatever. Mileage may vary. But it's interesting because I started using, full disclosure, and I have this on my website, my company's website, and so I pay for Google Workspace, and I've been using Gemini and been quite pleased with some of the stuff on that. I need to update my website with my disclosure. Started paying for Claude as well, on the basis of our conversations and some of my experience. I just decided it was time to branch out a bit, and I think it's statistically insignificant and definitely not in any form valid survey of its capabilities whatsoever. But the brief time I've been using it, I've been impressed.
Yeah, I told you I use it more than any other model for a lot of the research that I do. I think it just in general has performed better for me. And again, your mileage may vary, but so it's definitely not an endorsement, but it is one that I use. I use it quite often, and I still use ChatGPT, of course, and I use Gemini, and I run a local Mistral model that I use for certain things too, a small model that lets me do summarizations and things of NDA kind of material. So I have it, but it's not available to anybody else until it's supposed to be, right?
Yes, that's a good thing.
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely. But the other thing about this Anthropic move, this announcement about the search API, is that it's also an indication of search is heating up again because of the pressure, perplexity put on Google, and of course Google's had some legal challenges lately too, and then it started using Gemini. Its AI generated part has gotten much bigger in the results as well, and so
We're back to my absolutely brilliant technical sports analogy, I'm afraid, which is that's. I'm so sorry. Look, trust me, I like sports. I was never good at any of them, and I just have to own that. But I make a joke out of it. But yeah, it does feel like it's all in play. And to your point directly, I think this is part of that. What's interesting, I was reading somebody else was making a comment about this recently. I genuinely can't remember who it was, so I apologize to that person. But I will find out. Which was, kind of the challenge of these AI summaries is that, kind of the old model of search and SEO, SEO and driving people with content and stuff like that. was that the content creators got rewarded for their content. That
Yeah.
was kind of the concept, right? So I made some content, I gave them a search, someone clicked on my website.
Mhm.
That was kind of the basic. Now it might well be the case I make some lovely original content and it gets summarized by an agent or a search engine AI summary. I go, oh, that's good enough. I need to click on that website. And you start asking questions about the motivation for building content. And you can go way philosophical about this and go, well, maybe that's a good thing in some ways because it stops people trying to game SEO type stuff and whatever. And you can also say it's taking away potentially the motivation and drive for some people to create that original content. Don't know.
Well, I don't. I mean, so I mean, this definitely is a thing, right? And we know that there is a certain amount of disruption already in the search world because of AI that's enabled with an internet connection, like Perplexity or ChatGPT or whatever. Perplexity was the first one to really go hard after the search sort of paradigm, and it's a tool I use often. I mean, it is to me, it made a lot of sense when I was thinking about it to go rather than looking for a way to find an answer, I can go look for an answer. Then it saves me a lot of time. And I also don't have to go through, 2/3 of a page full of sponsored links before I get to one
that's not frustrating at all.
get to one that's not paid for, and I can realize that might be the one I was looking for. So I mean, it is, it is frustrating, but but I do think there's disruption. But the point you bring up about SEO is really interesting because I have looked at this a couple times and I don't know what the answer is yet, but in talking to SEO professionals, there is definitely first some fear because it is changing, and a good deal of well, yeah, but there will be something, and I don't disagree with that. There will be something that will matter when you talk about using the AI as the search replacement. But what does that look like for content? I don't I'm not I don't know, but I do think there is something that will emerge as we get better and use this more and more, but it's
Uh,
not going to be the same as the SEO, you know, practice
uh,
today.
Absolutely, and I think I'm not smart enough to figure out what that will be. If I was, I would go and do it and make billions and billions
And
of
make billions of dollars. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. You could vibe code that over the weekend and launch on Monday.
Yeah, okay. I mean, maybe. I like the optimism as ever. We'll see. But yeah, I think that's exactly right. The early days. You remember the early days of the internet and SEO, and people. It evolved with content marketing more and stuff like that. And I think we're just seeing another transition. And I guess the question has to be, and it's interesting. I'm not saying there's a wrong or a right answer here. I'm not saying any party is in the wrong or the right. But if there are going to be multiple agents or multiple AI capabilities which we can use to find information and do searches for the things that we're searching for, maybe that's in some ways a good thing, but also worryingly, I suppose it's yet more potential. And I'm not saying they are, but more potential black boxes where we're not quite sure how it's coming up with that answer.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean there's always that downside risk. I think and I also I think there is there's a couple things that could happen too. And I keep thinking about this like maybe in the end what happens for content is that human generated or content that appears human generated gets higher ranking, higher whatever we call it. I don't know. I guess ranking is a search term, not a whatever term. But I mean maybe that's where we get to at some stage that because I think the fear I always was that if you can produce content so quickly, you can flood the zone, so to speak, with all that content because you can generate it at an unbelievable pace. Now, how good is it? Unless you have editors, human people so on the way there checking it, it probably is, varying quality. I won't say bad or good. It's just somewhere,
Fair.
each one's going to have its own thing, right? So
Sure.
I mean, to me, that could be part of it. I don't know.
Mm. It's almost like you thought about that statement. And ranking, by the way, I suggest
Mm.
greater prominence. How about that? Higher prominence in the answer. Well, no, this I think you have beautifully. I appreciate. We are going to run out of time like we always do, and I think
Yep.
we've got maybe half our left, something like that.
Yeah.
But if you don't mind derailing us even further based on your last comment, I had some fun with this whole thing the other day. So I was given the occasion to write a lovely old-fashioned letter, which is something I really rather enjoy. It's a genuine pleasure. And I wrote this letter, and it was quite a thoughtful letter, gave a good amount of brain time, and I consider myself at least a reasonable writer. Maybe not the best, certainly not the best, but pretty good. And it was a genuine, handcrafted effort. And for some reason, I decided to run it through an AI detector because I thought, well, I wonder what to make of this. And the result was apparently it was only 33% human. And it was likely
I mean,
67%
I
AI.
suspect that's some comment on you and not the machine, but I don't know that.
Indeed. And when I posted this to LinkedIn, a number of people did indeed make that comment.
I would have expected that. Yeah.
I absolutely, as much like maybe I don't know, maybe I'm like one of the clones out. What are they called? Not called clones, are they in Blade Runner? What are they called?
Yeah. What are they called? Oh, I don't remember.
Synthetics, I can't remember. Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
They maybe don't know that they are synthetic.
Yeah.
Maybe that's me.
Maybe I don't know. I just thought maybe because because you're British, you sound more proper, and that's more like what the chatbot would have been producing. And so they thought if you sound British, they think you're a chatbot. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, and jokes aside, look, I mean, I think there were two things that came out more seriously for me anyway. It was just nice to hear from a bunch of people on LinkedIn. We haven't spoken to you for a while. The first one, and the kind of the smart comment from a former colleague of mine was, essentially the way that likely you as well as I learned how to write and were taught how to write when it came to reports and such like, has been adopted by many of these AI models. Right, so whether it's the Chicago style guide or Economist, or it doesn't really matter, whatever it is, the lack of complex sentences with only try to avoid contractions and so on and so forth has just become the way that they have started to write too. I put in the LinkedIn post, either I am a robot or I am AI, or I write like this, or AI writes like me, whatever.
Well, they could write like you. I mean, you were there before it was, so.
Well, as far as I know. As far as
I mean, at least as far as the use of transformers and the new GPT stuff. Now, as far as AI in general, I don't know. I'm not even quite that old, almost, but not quite.
So there's that aspect to it, and yeah, 100%. I mean, there's a chicken and egg kind of conversation there. But the other one for me was, pardon me.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
So the other one for me was another former colleague and friend wrote about the issues with these and their use, and I said, yeah, and I wonder how that feels if you're a student or a freelance writer or somebody, and you've done good work, you've worked really hard on it, you put your real load of effort, load of time, load of thinking into it. You have done, you may have done some research helped by AI, but you wrote it yourself because that's what you wanted to do, and it felt like the right thing to do. And I would argue is the right thing to do. Then someone runs it through a checker, and it goes. Does that mean that the student gets punished? Does that mean the freelancer doesn't get paid?
Yeah. Well, so that there have been a few cases, and of course, in the U.S., there have been a few cases of this already that students got failing grades because they were pushed through a AI checker, and it came back as mostly AI written, not human written, but in fact, it was completely human written. So I mean, they are definitely prone to mistake, as you have just proven, because I'm pretty sure you're more than 30% human. I'm relatively safe in saying that, I think. And I played with them some too. And to be honest, I've never had one, no matter if I wrote it completely, if I did research, I've never had it, if it's in my style, I've never had it come back and say it's any bit AI. Now, I'm sure there are things that I write that are sounding like that. And then there are certainly times when I have, like one of my favorite use cases is a simple one. Sometimes I just cannot get the first sentence of a blog post right. I try, I just can't come up with the right thing. And I'll put the paragraph into something like Claude and go, hey, can you suggest 10 opening sentences? And I may not use them exactly like that, but it's a very useful thing for me because it stimulates me. And I'm going, oh, I didn't even think of that angle. That's great. And then it helped me go, get going. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, no, indeed. And I think, there's a whole debate one could have about that. But the way I would think about it is there have been many times when I used to go to an office and sit with people and write reports and stuff. And I used to say, I have no idea what to do with this paragraph or this title. Can you read it for me and give me some ideas? Yeah.
Yep.
And for me,
it's the same kind of thing. I mean, and that
as long
is,
as you're not
you're right.
pasting, I think that's a reasonable thing to do, especially given that you like me rather. We sit in our home offices. We don't have colleagues around us. I mean, we've got people who can reach out to digitally or call or whatever. But it's not the same as leaning back in the chair and going, "Hey, fellow co-worker, what do you think of this random stuff I've written?"
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think that is there are several very good use cases like that, and I like the whole idea of brainstorming, or frankly, sometimes I'll come up with a concept for an article, and I'll go to one of the GPTs, Claude or Chat GPT, and just go build me an outline. Now, I may not use the outline exactly the way it puts it out, but it is a very complete. It's almost like a checklist for me. It's like, oh yeah, I didn't think of. I definitely should include that, or whatever. Because sometimes when you're thinking of an article, there's a piece of it that you just didn't think through and you would miss. But if you get it in a list, you can decide, no, I don't want to cover that in this, or that's a whole different article. Like that's but at least it stimulates the thought process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's a bit like, kind of building what I said, I suppose it's a bit like a digital peer review in some ways. I mean, I'm sure that now, I'm not sure, I know for a fact that you've edited many other analysts' research. My own
I have.
My own included, I think it's always super helpful. You make this really strong point here, but you didn't follow up on it, right? You didn't say, you didn't give an example to back it, or you didn't offer the flip side on it, or something like that.
Yeah.
And
that's peer review, right? That's what we've all done with peer review for years. And if you're in the analyst world, it's very useful. But then you're right, when you're sitting here by yourself in a home office, but now I'm surrounded by digital agents because I have all these different ways that I can interact with AI. Why wouldn't I use that as a peer review or a way to stimulate some thought about a topic or find some more, random research that I hadn't, looked at yet or whatever, right? It has definitely made me more productive. I would argue a lot more productive.
Yeah. And I think that's totally fair. And I think, kind of it's this paradigm shift. I don't like using that word, but I will. And there's no, we're back to that. There's a spectrum, there's a line of evolution, whatever you want to call it. I think we're still feeling our way through that, right? Because I think the way that you're talking about using AI for your research is very similar, not the same necessarily, but very similar to what I do. I know you do as well. I take great pride in the kind of crafting the words yourself. Others take a different approach, and what turns out to be right, I think depends on a lot of different factors.
Yeah, I mean, it ends up no matter what. I mean, if I said generate a paragraph about this topic, I mean that I would do that. But would I use it exactly like that? No. I mean, even if I did that, I would pull the paragraph in and end up editing in my voice, not its. Sometimes just having some framework to go from is useful, especially if you're looking at a new topic and you're trying to come up with a different way. So I don't know. I think I sort of think of it as hybrid, and it probably is, and I suspect that's the way people are going to go forward. Is AI augmentation? How about that?
Yeah, well, your car has an automatic gearbox and cruise control.
It does, and believe me, when I was younger, it did not have an automatic transmission. I hated automatic transmissions in fast cars. I like fast cars and I didn't like automatic transmissions. But these days, that transmission is so much better than I could have ever shifted that I am not bothering. And then, most of them you can at least use the flappy paddles and shift it yourself. But
I find those terribly.
I just let the car do it. It's way better than me. So,
so in the UK, you have to pass. If you pass an automatic driving test, you can only drive an automatic. You have to pass a manual if you want to drive a manual stick. And
it's a good idea. We don't do that here.
Indeed, and it was interesting because I won't lie. I much prefer automatic driving, but then of course I suspect I'm quite lazy. I definitely don't drive fast.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was a time when I had a 911 and that was a midlife crisis, but there was a time when I had a 911 and I couldn't see myself buy a sports car, an exotic sports car like that and not get a manual transmission. Like I just couldn't see it. But today I would definitely get the Triptronic. There's no way I would try to shift fast. But I mean, part of that is that it's just gotten that much better, right? It shifts so much faster, so much more accurately than I can. And not to mention the fact that my car has like 8 gears or something crazy. Like I would never remember to continue to shift. Like I had to get old after a while. So I don't know. Anyway.
Indeed. And what we're doing here, apart from translating ourselves slowly into being like some kind of car podcast, which would be
awesome. Which should be fun and all. We could be Top Gear. We could be Top Gear UK because I never liked the Top Gear America, but Top Gear UK would be.
There you go. Fair enough. But I think what we're doing is just touching on something that's really universal, and let's try and wrap it up in a way that makes somewhat kind of connection.
It does tie in.
I'll try. God, work with me here. Because kind of what we're talking about is the evolution of technology as it always has been, right? Which is it starts in a certain state, people don't like it, people don't trust it. In just the same way that there were places where motor cars, you have to have someone walk in front of your car with a flag and stuff like that. And then we started to trust a bit more. We used it a bit more, and I think that is just so universal, even when it comes to what we're talking about now. What's interesting is we've touched on many, many times before, and let's not get to philosophy 101 at this point, which is kind of the scale of it. And its ability to impact people in a way which being hit by a car is pretty impactful. I'm fairly certain pretty horrific impact.
But I haven't tried, and I'm not gonna. So, at least not in
but kind of if AI is making a decision about kind of, for example, your health, or at scale about people's health. Then kind of this. You can see where my brain goes with this kind of conversation.
Yeah, no, and I mean that, and we'll end after this, but it is the same as that Kasparov Big Blue example that I've used several times on here. The fact that that IBM built a computer in the 90s that was able to win chess hands down against a master. The master then realized that if you took an AI and combined it with a human, you actually got better results. So for 10 years or so, that's what he did until it got to the point where that wasn't true anymore. And and the AI could just do it much better than the human AI. And I suspect, you're going to see lots of things like that, like my automatic transmission that I didn't like because it wasn't as effective as manual. And now it's so much more effective. Why would I use it? Right. I mean, anyway. All right. Well, that's all the time we have today, although I would love to continue to talk about cars. But we did. Anyway, so I'm Michael Fauscette.
I'm Tom Pringle.
And thanks for joining this month's AI Pulse. And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the show. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review to help others find us. For more research on AI and other software, check out arianresearch.com. If you're an expert in AI, generative AI, or business automation, either as a provider or an end user, email your information to disambiguation@arianresearch.com. Don't forget to join us next week. Disambiguation is an Arian Research production. I'm Michael Fauscette, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.